Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, musicians, artists, you name it, all around the world of crypto and blockchain. And today I have an amazing guest. He comes to us from Ireland. His name is Owen DRISCOLL. He is the co-founder of TRRUE. Owen, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're
looking
very
forward
welcome.
to this.
I'm looking forward to it too. In fascinating conversation, I believe. But let's start off with some housekeeping, and you have an interesting story, so I want to hear it. What is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
If I was to tell you from a overview, you would probably say that doesn't make any sense. So I'll put a little bit of context into it and tell you how I got here, right? So I'm what they say is a serial entrepreneur. Not mad about the term, but long story short, left school quite young. I left school when I was 15. I was out in the workplace. I did some traveling around Australia. I came home. I was involved in sales. I decided at a young age of 23, I was going to open my first Subway store, which is Subway Eat Fresh, the global franchise, at a ripe old age of 23. So I found myself around 2007, around the time of the first financial crash, all in on this. And long story short, financial crash comes on, it gets a little bit tough, kept at it, grew it into 3 locations, as well as developing the first online delivery system and ordering system for Planned Oil or for Subway at the time. And so that led me on to kind of being in that industry for about 11 years, which is quite long from there. But I suppose somewhere in between, I knew maybe this wasn't really for me, and for lots of different reasons that I won't go into. So I decided to go back and I studied horticultural science, specializing in pharmaceutical products in Ireland. And this came from I suppose wanting to expand into a newer, better business that was some way green aligned. So I went back to college. I studied horticultural science. During that time, I was asked to form a team to write a paper for the importation of a pharmaceutical product into Ireland. So it needed to be a very highly written paper, and it was going to go to the Health Product Regulatory Authority. During this period, I was still in college, so I was doing some work placement. I was getting my hands dirty on site, going around to pharmaceutical production facilities that were producing raw materials, and I discovered blockchain through one of my partners at the time. This was around 2015, I would say, and getting into blockchain and kind of loving it. It was around the time of the DAO. This could be fantastic. Everything could be smart contracts. So I went down a very deep rabbit hole on it, right? Now I took it from a very and it's important, I took it from an operations point of view, and from Subway, recording, all of this sort of stuff, lots of governance, lots of manuals and books. So having immutable ledgers and transparency, and you combine that with moving pharmaceutical raw materials around the world, you start to see this need for a very strong operational procedure along with an immutable ledger. So this is border inspection points, and this is all sorts of things that we were considering around the immutability of it at the time, and it was so early. Long story short, down a rabbit hole with Aeternity blockchain, and I somehow kind of got up to speed on that enough where they would let me be a lead ambassador, and that was kind of the real beginning of it. So the role really was to explain to people from my point of view, from an operational point of view, where the benefits of immutable ledgers and tech and blockchain technology and maybe utilizing real world oracles, mobile first interface, to explain where this comes from. And the benefits of it. But at that time of the blockchain industry was very conceptual. It was all very new. I was doing talks and stuff like that, 10, 15, 20 people to try to, get community and that kind of thing. But look, what eventually happened is I went and did an accelerator in Malta, specifically on blockchain, and we were developing ways of digitizing real world assets. We won that, but due to COVID, it didn't go ahead. And that brings me to the current solution, which is TRRUE. And we got some support from from the Irish government through New Frontiers, which allowed us to go into like an incubator, develop the program develop the product and the need for the product over kind of 8 or 9 months. And that brings us, I wouldn't say up to date, but the background of where it comes from.
A lot of companies were affected by COVID. So um, I want to find out,
Black Swan event, we were told. Yeah.
I want to find out what TRRUE and Plandale are all about. And then also, I noticed you had some recent news. There was a news announcement regarding investing in with you. Please share that announcement was too.
Yes, definitely. And it kind of leads into a bit of what we're about. So Plant Oil has been funded and to date up with grants. So we've done our first pre-seed round, and that allowed us to. So as Plant Oil, so we built the company as Plant Oil, and it is important to mention that we're aiming to be a regulated platform. So working away in the background and getting our first registration, which is a virtual asset service provider registration in Italy under the Italy regime, which allows us to handle virtual assets. It's a European thing. So that has brought us to the point where we're now about to start priming and getting ready for main product launch, which means we started community building. We felt that, and you named it there. You said Plant Oil and TRRUE. So we used to be called Plant Oil, and up until this week, we were called Plant Oil, but now we're rebranding as TRRUE. And there's a good few reasons why, but one, I think TRRUE is a much cleaner and nicer name, and it makes a lot more sense. And Plant Oil is an old Irish word, so that's where that comes from. So yeah, we raised a pre-seed round, and we are we're going to be announcing some big news in terms of community drive and things that community can get involved in within the next couple of weeks. And yeah, there's some more big news coming as well. So yeah, it's all go on that side at the minute.
Awesome. So one of the things you guys do is called impact crowdfunding, right?
Yes.
I want to what that's all about and why we must make the economy and business climate around environmental change easy for people to meet, support, and collaborate and cooperate.
Yep. And it kind of goes back to what is true, what is true. And this is, one of the things that certainly, and you'll know this from crypto and blockchain, right, is that some of the things that we've done with crypto and blockchain have supercharged some of the old structures that we know. And then we're kind of using the old words to try to explain some of the new stuff. For example, ICO was a type of crowdfunding, but you don't call it crowdfunding. Nobody would call it crowdfunding, but it is a type of crowdfunding at the end of the day, an ICO. But when people hear crowdfunding, they think Kickstarter or old thing type style systems, maybe some of the equity style systems. For us, I suppose what we see it as is an investment platform. And the reason we call it an investment platform is because by combining the technology, combining European crowdfunding service provider regulations, and combining bigger regulations as we grow, we're leveling the playing field between retail and institutional investors. And this is really important because it's the important piece, I think, to the transparency of the governance and where the direction of money is going in terms of making a real impact. So when we talk about impact, we're talking about companies that are focused on environmental, social, and governance problems, but are doing it in a way that they can measure and capture recordable metrics and data points to prove their impact. So, for example, when we talk about impact, we would also say triple bottom line companies. So a company that's focused on people, planet, and profit. And again, just to sometimes you would hear the term social impact. And again, there's this preloaded thought that means that somebody's going to get a handout or get it, not a handout, but get a grant or get a donation maybe, and then spend that money within their local and make an impact. And that is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But we're also living in an age where there is really smart and clever technology that is circular in its development. There's very little waste. It has a massive on the ground impact, but it's profitable. I mean, we speak with lots of companies, and I'm not saying that there's one catch all, but BioH2 companies that are managing to harvest from excess heat rather than having to go through a load of processes just to produce that hydrogen. These kind of things that are capturing maybe waste points and capturing that energy or capturing that product and making a newer product. The mycelium industry, so that's like the industry that will it's the roots on mushrooms basically, but you can use it to replicate packaging, right? And you can make it into packaging rather than using polystyrene. But yet that's a waste product. You know, it's a waste product that will completely replace a whole polystyrene industry, but it's the waste from the food crop, you know. So again, like this is super kind of circular type thinking, and really impactful, because there's a direct, we've replaced polystyrene with something that's totally natural and biodegradable, you know. So what our platform is a way of impact investors curating like-minded founders that have big plans to try to make people planet profit inroads, and they can invest and buy equity shares or representation of equity shares. And we're getting into like kind of technical legal in the background there, like the terminology there, but a representation of an equity share in that company. Why would you use technology for it? So Plant Oil is a digital asset platform where we connect real world assets that we've digitized on blockchain. We have a self-sovereign identity network, which allows people to store their verified credentials in a user-friendly and protected way. But for a company, it allows them to show their verified credentials to their investors in a protected way. We then tie that together with a decentralized database. In one instance, it'll be IPFS. That's like a triangle of digital governance, identities connected to assets connected to their ESG data. And this triangle of kind of transparency and governance, we believe, is kind of some of the pieces that are lacking both in the fundraising industry and also in the environmental or impact, ESG. All of these words have become very polarized because of all of the damage that people have done with greenwashing, you know. So there has to be a more transparent way to do this. What the platform then does is we provide a very simple user interface, and investors can participate in these rounds, buy equity shares, have a say using on-chain governance of voting through the app, and the companies can have a way of managing those investors moving forward, which is very different to the old crowdfunding structure.
You said something that kind of, yeah, you talked about ICOs. You know, I was an ICO advisor in 2017 and 18. I came from traditional insurance, right? So AIG, we're coming from AIG. Everything's stable, everything's structured. Then I go into crypto and immediately become an ICO advisor. So my way of thinking and looking at the world completely flipped, right?
Yeah.
Now we're talking about ESG investing with a generation of people who are used to saying, "Oh, it's an environmental thing," you know, and you can't make the connection between, you know, how they live day to day and what the real impact is for the environment, right? So, you know, where are you at compared to the ICOs, and how can people begin to think about how they can make an impact through this social investment?
Yeah. Okay, so there's a couple of bits to it. Like, is one, I was around and like participated in ICOs as well, and so I can tell you from the community and the way that felt at the time, was like, you know, we're getting involved in something that's really new, really really cool, and if it had fulfilled all the promises, right, that were getting higher and bigger and bigger and bigger as the ICO heydays were going on, Jesus, the world would be a different place. But none of it happened. Like, most of it didn't happen, right? And a lot of it to me, right, falls back to all roads lead to governance at the end of the day, right? With this stuff, all road leads to governance. I mean, what the problem is, and I can see it from multiple points of view, because I can see it from a startup founder point of view as well, is that a startup founder is out and they're raising capital, which through an ICO, so that they can build their platform, they can provide that platform to their ICO purchasers. But, you know, best laid plans and all that, and things fell apart, and they never set up a company, and they went to some weird jurisdiction, and they didn't know that they should have been regulated, or they were doing all this kind of stuff. So yes, I know that maybe the industry as a whole won't like this, but regulation, and not just adopting the old regulation, but working with regulators. In Europe, we've got the marketing crypto assets coming, and we've got VASP, so it's the virtual asset service provider, which allows us to kind of get a grasp on some of this stuff instead of just like letting them off. So I think there's joined up thinking between the regulators, between the innovators, and between the communities and investors. Because the problem is that the investors and communities are being burnt and by both sides, either ICOs or now they're saying that the banks aren't doing things right, institutions are greenwashing. So like there's somewhere in between, but a lot of the stuff boils back to the hierarchy of human needs as well. Like the investors are trying to better their lives, the founders are trying to build better products, and there's not a lot of joined up thinking. The regulators are saying, you can't do this because that's over there. And now you've got new impact regulations as well, by the way, and sustainable financial directive regulations in play. So it's all kind of connected and they merge into each other, To me, the beauty of the ICO was that there was liquidity. There was a fast flow of liquidity, right? There was a fast flow of liquidity, but that lacked governance and recording. So that's why the regulators don't like it. So what we've done is we've made a hybrid model. We've made a hybrid model, and we've worked and strived towards regulations for like 2 years. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a platform that is in line with the neobank users and Web 2 users. I don't like using these Web 2 and Web 3 words, but like if you try to frame it in your mind, the Web 2 users that are used to neobanks and Revolut style platforms, and then the other side, the early adopters who are the Web 3 community and they're used to using digital assets. They understand the social implications of owning your assets in such a unique way, private keys, self-custody. They understand that the governance they can have by owning those assets and having a vote. So we've tried to make a platform where you have all of these functions, but we've taken all the complexities of the blockchain layers out of it. And that means that Web 3 users and Web 2 users should be able to use it. Like,
there's definitely a bridge to pass across.
And the regulator are happy because technically with a virtual asset service provider, you're allowed to sell tokens. So one of the big things was that one of the ICO days, there was nothing. They were like, there is no regulation there, and that's fine. It's fine when people say there is no regulation. This is not a regulated thing. But anybody who's working in digital assets or any of this sort of stuff should be aware that just because the regulator didn't regulate about it doesn't mean they're not aware of it. And it could also affect you if you want to become a regulated company. And the majority of companies dealing with some sort of digital assets will need some sort of regulation at some time, either to take payment, hold the custody, whatever it may be. But there's a lot of, there's loads that isn't regulated, but there's a lot of stuff that would be considered to be regulated if such a that they are working on. So you got to ask yourself the question, do you want to be on the wrong side of that once they write and dotted line, this is no regulated?
Let's talk about that regulation. And go back to greenwashing. You said greenwashing. How do we actively combat greenwashing practices?
So just an interesting fun fact. TRRUE is there is a global initiative to try to prevent and fix greenwashing. Just to explain what greenwashing is for your audience, so they know, greenwashing is the practice of companies publicly going out and saying that they're doing something which is environmentally, socially, and governance beneficial, and then not really doing anything. It could be a case, or they could make specific claims that they're doing something, and they might not do it, or they might fudge the truth. And you might find that it's just kind of putting a bit of a green spin on them. But where a lot of this comes across is when you start looking at financial reports, you should see evidence of this. So interestingly, there is a global financial innovation network, and that is the World Bank and 13 world regulators have put together the first global collaboration to try to address greenwashing. And interestingly, TRRUE was selected out of 10 companies. There's some of the companies in it are global companies, and so it's a bit of an honor for us to be accepted into this. What we've done is we've partnered with Munster Technology University in Cork here, and their artificial intelligence unit. And what we've done is we've made a sentiment analysis tool which can go and check Twitter and public available data about what companies are claiming. So we've trained it to understand what a green claim is, and then we've designed it so we can feed it that company's annual report and see if they can actually find any reference in it. And what this can do is that can actually help you categorize the risk of who might be greenwashing and who's not. For example, company A has made a claim And within their financial reports, they have lots of reference to it. They have lots of third-party reference to it, scientific reference, and they have calculations to back up their claim within their financial report and their annual reports. Company B has said, oh, we're going to do something out here, and made a claim, and there's a loose reference to it within their reports, can't really categorize it. And then company C is like said something and you can't find any reference to it at all. Like the chances that company is greenwashing is very, very high, you know. So this is just a kind of, because we've got so much data in the world, we've got so much information. So this is a way that we would manage some of the credentials that we spoke about first, is, you know, the identity, the assets, and the ESG data. This is managed by this type of AI tool. Now, interestingly, we're in this global financial innovation network, and I'll send you the video in a minute. We don't speak about this as an oracle, but in blockchain, we call this a real world oracle, because it's handling and dealing with real. No, I call it a real world oracle. And again, I might speak to what I think about some of the oracle tools, and that they do check a lot of already immutable data. So, for example, you'd see a lot of oracle checkers check blockchains, and that's great. You know, there's a need for that, but oracles, real world oracles, could be built in a way where they're provided by professional service and the data is verified and fed onto a system. And that to me is much more powerful in a digitized world. Like in a world where we're moving, you've got minimal trust anchors. I always wear a trustless systems t-shirt, like, you know, we're making trustless systems. Realistically, you know, if you can have trust anchors, then you can protect the data in a way using zero knowledge proofs. You know, you can start moving into something that's a bit more decentralized but verified. That's the kind of space we're in.
I never considered that oracles could be helpful in solving traditional financial reporting.
Not just traditional financial reporting, they could be used for everything. If you imagine you're a quantity surveyor, right? If you're a quantity surveyor working on a massive building, and you could act as a professional service with an oracle, you could provide that data afterwards should the building burn down. You know, there's loads of professional services, if they looked at this in a way of providing it as a service, as somebody who can sit between the real world and the chain and be the oracle. They don't have to be the only one. It could be consensus. You could have 3 engineers doing it, right? But now you're starting to kind of go, well, no, we've got real world data fed in, verified. Should something go wrong, now the immutability becomes valuable. You know, no, we're not just checking it for the sake of checking it, you know.
Interesting. Okay. Learn something new every day. Great. This is great. Let me just shift gears just a little bit. Okay. Let's look at some of the, you know, United Nations Sustainable Goal initiatives, right? When it comes to environment. You know, what are some of the current challenges? And I don't want to go into the rabbit holes of each, but I would want to touch on some things. What do you see as some of the current challenges, and how are you working to help solve them?
Yeah, so I think that they go hand in hand. One of the big things with the UN SDGs is there's a lot of, sometimes not all the time, but there's a lot of capital requirement. And I suppose from a practical point of view, one of the things that we've spotted is that companies that are new, innovative, coming into the market as an inverted commas call themselves an impact company, they've usually decided to call themselves an impact company because of their scientific method that they're going to achieve their goal, right? And one thing that we would, I suppose, see in terms of, let's say, the UN SDGs, like transparency is a big thing. Food production, the transparency of food production. And one of the problems within ecosystems, I suppose, for example, somebody who is producing food aimed at one of these goals, one of these sustainability goals, they need to be fully aware of their up and down chain value. So, for example, it can't be an organic, or, you know, I can't be working specifically on one of these goals if I'm taking product from somebody who's completely ignoring them. So if I need a packaging material and I'm working in line with these goals, like, it would be insane for me to just go to anybody and with no vision or thinking about what they're doing and how they're producing it, right? Because I could be just doing multiple damages because I'm not thinking about the implications up and downstream. For example, I've produced I've a fruit that needs an independent wrapper, that wrapper is plastic. Like, I may as well be wasting my time, you know? So there is this joined up thinking is required in terms of the product chain. Where does it go? What's it being used for? How do I produce it? Is everything that I'm using to produce it being done correctly? So when companies are thinking about raising funds to tackle one of these problems, they need the type of governance and transparency that Plant Oil can provide, but they also need multiple actors that they can trust. And that's the end goal for Plant Oil, is that it's an ecosystem play, that companies can come to Plant Oil, but our technology will connect them afterwards. So that's allowing them to move verified credentials between operators. So that's only one point. Right, that's how Plant Oil is thinking about it. Sorry, got another rabbit hole on that one. But I suppose in terms of like the overarching thing, what we do need to be doing, from my point of view, and I think it comes back again a little bit to technology and maybe generational technology, is that what you'd see a lot of the time with new innovations coming through, certainly through horticulture and agriculture, is that they're really thinking about the waste.
Yeah, one of the UN goals is to reverse biodiversity loss, right?
Yes.
And I know some projects, they have some investments in that arena, and I wanted to find out, like, going at it just a little bit further, how do you see that us being able to do that by using blockchain technology in your platform?
So I think it's a bit of both, right? I don't think blockchain is the solution to it, right? But I think what the solution is adapting technology to be able to handle this sort of stuff. So let's speak about biodiversity for a second, right? So what you will see is that companies will often, you'll often see projects that will say, we're going to plant X amount of trees, and that X amount of trees is going to capture X amount of carbon, or it's going to, it will, carbon trees, they're done. I'm done. If a field, I'm going to put some trees in it, it's going to be a carbon benefit for it. There's a few problems that people obviously talk about and then obviously don't talk about. So one thing is that in those systems, companies will often future sell the carbon capture of that. So legally they're allowed to bundle up that carbon and sell it into the future. And all right, so now we start thinking straight away from a kind of horticulture, from a science point of view, right? There could be some issues here. But all right, are the trees local? A lot of the time people will pick a plant or product that is will grow fast but haven't taken in the local environment. For example, we grow in Ireland Scandinavian pine, spruce, and that has replaced our natural ecosystems of oak. Now, yes, they grow much faster and it's fantastic, and they do carbon, but they've completely destroyed the biodiversity and local ecosystems that exist here. So when you're thinking about impact and verified credentials and UN SDGs, there's over 4,500 hittable points and metrics now within the UN SDGs. So if you were to think, yes, we've got 16, 17 overarching, you start boiling them down and start looking at the different credentials, that gets into about 4,500. So now the old system, carbon equals whatever. What we see, a new system, and especially when you start thinking about biodiversity, if you were to imagine that you've got a blank field and you want to replace that blank field, which is biodiversity. Biodiversity is getting that ecosystem back up with all of the pieces that it needs to operate on its own. And people will often think like trees, and that's fine, but like grasses, there's probably there's not one type of grass, but below that you have your microorganisms, your myceliums, you've your specific insects, and then you've got all of these natural things that happen within plants. It's called companion planting, that you'll find plants will grow next to each other better because one will be an natural insecticide to the other. This is biodiversity, right? And this is what we're moving into, is a future of biodiversity score. Because it's so complex, you need you need technology that can record and track and manage lots of minuscule bits of data to make sure that this is being done appropriately. So that's kind of one of the ways you could look at it. We look at it in another way, is that You can't boil the ocean. And the guys that are doing a good mission and they're on a good mission, they're usually trying to capture some of this stuff. We're trying to provide a framework and match them with a framework for them to manage it and match them with investors so they can actually do it.
Got it. You know, I grew up thinking that the environment was this obscure thing. You know, then I went to college. One of my minors in college was geology, and I got more interested in it. You know, but a lot of people still think, you know, from the older generations that the environment is like there's no global warming because it's cold in the winter, you know, or there's no global because it's hot in the summer, right? But then you said blockchain technology is this generational technology, right? So how do we begin to educate people who are pretty ignorant, you know, about the UN development goals and about what you're doing and about how this generational technology does make a difference and have an impact and how we can help?
I think there's probably three parts to that equation. One is that you've got this new generation coming up, right? And we know that millennials or whatever, Generation Z or whatever, 90% of high net worth individuals in that category want to invest in something that's in line with their goals. And their goals are socially and environmentally oriented, like, because we're living in a very messed up world. We have got people that, whether they like to admit it on the far side in institutions, are fully aware of this and are probably saying nothing. If you look at some of the, we'd be very plugged into this, but like there is a global regulation, SFDR, which means that all institutions are now culpable if they ever said they had anything green on their books or have a green fund. They now need to prove that they haven't been greenwashing. So you can check if you can kind of Google there and you'll see that maybe 2 or 3 really, really large banks this year have been raided by big teams of people and they've taken their stuff because they're greenwashing. And these are very reputable banks and institutions. So this is a global regulation. And you see in the UK, I won't quote the number, but it's over 50% of their assets could have a problem with this in green funds, over 50% of those funds. So you've got the bankers and the institutions that have been investing scary amounts of money into green initiatives and green companies and these kind of things. You've got green bonds and all these kind of things. So they're super aware of it. And you've got the people who want to see more of a change, but they can see that the other end is still in control of it. And then you've got somewhere in between where they've been battered with lots of propaganda, lots of basically lobbying, either from one side or the other. And nobody knows what's right or what's in the middle. And like, we're old enough, Jamil, to know and to know historically of advertising campaigns around food, nutrition that was government sponsored, that was totally wrong. So you can kind of see why people would have a bad taste in their mouth, you know what I mean, like with certain things and a lack of trust in certain ways. And again, I think the only way to get through it is transparency.
You said propaganda. And earlier you said trust anchors. How can these trust anchors defeat the propaganda and have people trust the technology and trust, you know, into what they're doing is making an impact?
I think there's a new way that we're going to build technology. I think there's 2 things going on. I think the smart guys who are you know ahead of this, like the W3 consortium, these kind of guys, who are building the standards of the new internet, that are building the standards of the new technology, are building a lot of this in mind. And again, like, maybe some of it just kind of fits in places, but like some of the reasoning for using decentralized databases is because we can't keep building massive ones, you know, and centralized databases aren't necessarily going to be the future. And we're in an energy crisis, all sorts of things. Anonymity on the internet has caused an awful lot of problems. But the problem is then the data risk on the flip side if you give away all that anonymity. So I think we're somewhere in between. I mean, our take on it is that we need self-sovereign identities, where they have been verified by independent trust anchors and their credentials are given back to me because they're mine. And I can opt in to show those verification points without revealing any of my data, you know, because it's not needed. And I can then participate. And I think thinking about it like this, like that we're really going to shape a new future, but maybe we even need to shape new technology to do it. Then it starts becoming, I won't say attainable, but it's like eating an elephant one bite at a time. It's like, we're getting there.
I don't think I'd be able to eat an elephant in one sitting.
I'll give you a hand.
I do want to thank you very much today for this amazing conversation. I enjoyed speaking with you, and I have one last question. It's and thank you again. Thank you very much. It's like I like when I learn new things. So,
sorry if I go down rabbit holes. Like I'm yeah. Go on, keep going. My apologies. I wait till you start recording.
yeah, no, I'm good. So my last question, it's an easy one. It's how can people find out more information about you, about TRRUE, about what you're doing and what you're up to?
Yeah. So TRRUE has got some huge news coming, and we're basically running out like a super user thing in the next couple of weeks and months. So if they could go to TRRUE.io, if they could follow us on Twitter, it would be amazing. And if always feel free to reach out to me directly. You'd find me Owen O'Driscoll at LinkedIn, or you'll TRRUE.io, or you'll get the team on Twitter. But a like and a share will go a long way, and keep up for the new news that's coming quickly.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
No problem. And thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed it.